And we are live. Here we go.
I'm the general manager of Fred Beats Key and Langhorne. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about Larry Feldman and Career Changers USA. Larry and I have been working together for about the last 12 years now, and anything I've ever needed as far as recruiting, training, Larry's been right there. Larry's got me salespeople, he's got me managers, he's got me technicians even through the toughest times in the industry, and he is just the kind of guy who's going to tell you exactly what's on his mind. He's going to tell you exactly what he thinks. But Larry also has the expertise to back it up. When he was in the dealership world, he was a top performer. And that's really important to my staff, especially as it pertains to training. A lot of people can come in and teach out of a textbook, but Larry has a real world experience dealing with customers, dealing with situations in dealerships that we go through on a daily basis and try to train on. But Larry's been through it, so he can really empathize with the people and tell you what's worked for him and maybe what way not to go. Larry is just always at a 10. I mean, his energy level is always up there. And I think people, they just love that and they feed off of it. He's not faking it. He is genuinely excited to come in and help you. He's excited to come in and help grow your business. And he's one of those people who just really enjoys seeing dealers succeed and have a lot of fun at the same time.
Life is about connection. Having a support system to lean on. And roads to endless possibility. At every turn, guiding the way, we are building the connections that move you.
So what would your dealership feel like if your entire sales staff was literally on fire, your sales and service staff? They were nonstop all over social media, completely dominating your marketplace. They could do it in 30 days or less and then continue their education to do it for an entire 6 months or a year. You literally would completely take over the entire marketplace and no one would be able to compete with you. And that's what we can do for you. So when you're walking around your community, whether you're at local restaurants or you're going to the gym, you don't want to be bothered? Fine, you won't be bothered. But a lot of people will walk up to you and say, oh my God, I love your social media. Your staff is amazing. We love what you're doing in the community. We want to come buy a car from you. We want to get an oil change at your dealership. Your community is absolutely going to love you. And it doesn't matter what platform you're on. You could be on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all social media platforms. You will literally be all over the place. And not only will you have ads running, but your own staff is going to be promoting your brand and promoting themselves within the dealership and within the business. So it's like running an ad times 100-fold because your entire staff is participating in the process. I've traveled all over North America. I've trained Toyota. I've trained Nissan. I've been to driving sales. I've been to Women in Auto. I get hired as a speaker for conferences at universities all over the country. And I can help change the trajectory of your dealership right now.
Good morning and welcome. So let me just get into it. Here we go. So let's go here. Stop sharing. Move over. All righty. So good morning, everybody. Let me just do that. All right. So we're going to start initially with our slide deck and my disclaimer. So for a few book recommendations, first one was Ultimate Collector Cars, Luxury and Speed, World's Greatest Cars, and the Car Show book. A disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed on the AutoHub show are those of our guest speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the AutoHub show or Ian Nethercott and Jeff Polo, any other firm or associated agency. You can take a look at the disclaimer on our website, and let's get into it. Our auto show's worth it in 2024, and just in case you are working in the front line in auto, next week's show will be the frontline staff show. So if you work retail yourself, we'd love to have you as a guest. Just reach out. Here we go. All right. So good morning, everybody. We got David Adams from the Global Automakers, and we also have Jason Campbell from the Toronto Auto Show. We also have Peter Smith, and we have one of our sponsors, Troy Glennon from CDK Global. So Jason, maybe you can start by telling us a little bit more about yourself and then answer this question afterwards. The question is, during the global pandemic, stores closed, the economy shut down, and car shows stopped. Now that we're on the other side, the shows are back. What has changed, and what's the future of the auto shows, in your opinion?
Well, thanks for having us, Ian.
Yeah, no worries.
Nice to chat again. My background is I've come from auto sector in the last, 25 years before I came to join the auto show. I was working primarily in Europe and in motorsports and different levels of motorsport, mostly 20 years of that in Formula One, before coming back here to run the Canadian Auto Show, which was a very successful show in North America. In fact, it set the bar for many of the other modifications that other shows did, including New York and LA show. And I've been running the show here in Toronto since 2014. My first show was 2015, so it was 10 years more or less that I've been here now. What's to come for shows? I mean, obviously we did have a very difficult 2-year span when we couldn't run events. And when we came back to life again in 2023 show, it was also a challenge because there were a lot of brands we were trying to convince to come back into exhibit at a time when they didn't know whether there was going to be another lockdown, whether there'd be more closures, and we were facing big product challenges. And so last year when we came back in 2023, we really came back with about half the brands present. And we weren't alone. The other shows that did come back also faced those kinds of challenges, and we're not fully through that yet. This year we had a really strong show. We had an additional 12 mainstream brands rejoin us, and we set an attendance record this year at the show. So the people were coming back. There's a big built-up demand for people coming back to the market when cars weren't available, and the wait times were a very long time. And so I think there was a mixture of, in 2023 we had a really strong year as well, because of people just build up not having been able to come to the show for a few years. And now we're back with more brands. It's been a very positive year for us, and we're wanting to use that momentum to bring more brands. We're in the middle of discussions right now, trying to get some of the brands that took a step out last year and this year to come back and be there. And we've had some really strong numbers from our survey data.
And what's your advice on twisting their arm to get them to come back? What do you think?
Well, I think we've got the benefit of a very robust survey. We've got over 7,300 people that filled out a survey that came to the show this year. They tell us what brands do they own, what are they there cross-shopping for, who added brands to their plans. I mean, over 50% of the people that came to the show added more brands to their consideration list. And we got a very clear picture of who's coming and what do they own. And it's a very clear message to those. There's a large number that are in the purchase funnel. 65% of the people that came to the show say they're in the market for the next 24 months. 34% of them, 36% are in the market right now in the next 12 months to buy a car. And if you take a look at how many of the mainstream brands, all of the brands that were exhibiting in 2023 returned again in 2024, and we saw another major shift of more brands coming and joining us, including some of the brands that obviously the big name brands like Ford and Lincoln were back, which we're really happy to see because they were a huge disappointment not to have them there. And then we've got some smaller brands like Volvo, Polestar that normally only do EV shows. They also came back to join our show. And a lot of the shows are doing that EV education piece. So we do an indoor EV test track and outdoor track. And that's, again, the other two major shows in North America, being New York and LA, also do a similar kind of activity. And that's, in this day and age, despite there being challenges in the EV sector, it's an important thing that people are interested in, want to learn more about. And by offering that, it brings in a different audience as well. So I'm very happy with how we ended up at the show this year. We obviously want to continue to get back to the prime of the auto show seasons, which it's called 2019, and be able to get back the fullest offering of brands for our consumers coming through the door. But we've had very positive feedback from all of the consumers this year.
Thanks for that, and thanks for the information. It's in the chat if anyone's interested. If anyone's interested in that on our list, just send me an email, Ian and Jeff at AutoHubShow.com. Happy to send that out. So, David, a completely different point of view. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do and, more importantly, your opinion.
Sure. So my name is David Adams. I'm the president and CEO of the Global Automakers of Canada, which is a national trade association. We have 15 members that both distribute and manufacture vehicles in Canada, Toyota and Honda being our two manufacturers. And for those that may not be aware, Toyota and Honda are also the two largest producers in Canada out of the 5 manufacturers. We also have had some of the new entrants into the marketplace join our association. So, for instance, VinFast has recently joined our association, and we're continuing to hope that others will join as well. Tesla, of course, doesn't join any trade association. They're entity unto themselves. But so a lot of the work that the association does is primarily government relations, lobbying, that sort of thing on behalf of the member companies. We do have a show committee within the industry association. So we work with Jason and his team and the other auto shows across Canada to a fairly decent degree. But then, Jason and the other auto show managers have their own direct contact with certainly all of our member companies as well, and work towards getting them involved in the shows and full participation in the shows.
And what do you think is the future of auto shows, having worked with the OEM side and also the show side for many years?
Yeah, so I just celebrated my 19th anniversary with the Global Automakers of Canada, and I worked for about the same period of time with the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, which is the other trade association that represents the Detroit 3 automakers. So yeah, over that course of time, I've seen a lot of change in auto shows, and I think a lot of the change in auto shows really comes down to the changes that we've just sort of seen societally over that period of time, where you didn't have an option to go online and look at vehicles or have any sort of experience with vehicles, at least collectively, other than going to one spot, the auto show. So I know I grew up in the auto industry, and when I was a kid, that was Dad, let's go down to the auto show. We always made a point of going down to the auto show and seeing what was what. And I think people, whether it's on the sales side of the business or production side of the business or on the auto show side of the business, as Jason was mentioning, he talked about, returning to pre-pandemic times. And I guess sort of throw a different perspective out there. I'm not sure in any of those areas that there's a return to so-called normal. I think we're in a brave new world as far as sales, production, auto shows, really anything related to the automotive industry, because there is so much flux right now going on in the industry, regardless of what area that you're talking about. But I did want to say kudos to Jason for the the Canadian International Auto Show. Fabulous job this year, and worked very hard, to bring back some of our members, frankly, that weren't involved in the show, and also really put a lot of other kind of programming into the show. Classic vehicle elements, and also elements that were very sort of family friendly, that encouraged the auto show to be more of a family experience, as opposed to maybe guys and their buddies just going down and seeing some cars. So and you guys well know the data that women are involved in making things like 60%, either directly or indirectly, or maybe even higher, of the decisions involved in purchasing a vehicle. So you want to make sure that that whole family experience is there, and there's something for all of them down at the auto shows.
Yeah, I think Katrina, who's been on our show multiple times, did a number of posts about, I think, some Hollywood cars that were at the show in Toronto, if memory serves me. I didn't go to the show, but maybe Peter can speak to it, since he lives in the Greater Toronto area. Maybe he can speak to his experience at the show. You have a minute, Peter?
Well, thank you, Ian.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So I have to say, I've been going to the Canadian Auto Show, CIAS, since 1979.
Wow.
That was my first year there. So if you can count experience with the show, I think I have it. The return of the show in 2023 was, although a disappointment, it showed light at the end of the tunnel, because you saw people wanting to come back. And then in 2024, the addition of, it was 12 manufacturers that came back into the fold. It really showed that people want the auto show. A lot of manufacturers, and I'm going to blame this on the manufacturers, they structure shows poorly, and it's not the dealer bodies, because the dealer bodies understand that they need the shows, because it gives them the massive exposure that they need for representation. The manufacturers are looking at it as, is it an expense or is it a cost? And they're two different things. It should be looked at as an expense, not a cost. Costs are non-recoverable, expenses are. So seeing the great turnout, the great event that it was this year, it was absolutely phenomenal. I look forward to next year, and I think OEMs should be really tailing into the understanding that this is a must, an absolute must to be involved to get their products out there.
Yeah, I mean, I know Jeff was at the Vancouver show this year. I live in Calgary now, but he was saying that there are a lot of dealers stepped up and actually had booths there. Some high-end dealer groups, some mid-range groups, and then of course there's always the EV stuff these days. Troy, did you have any thoughts on auto shows? What's your experience been?
Just to add on that, it seems that Stellantis has pulled from all shows and is leaving it up to the dealer bodies to actually participate if they wish. Again, I think that is a poor decision on Stellantis given their circumstances. So yeah, I agree 100% with what you're saying.
Any thoughts, Troy, on manufacturers? And I'm assuming you guys probably around some auto shows, I would guess.
We've been to one or two. What I will say is I didn't get to go to the one in Toronto, but I did in Vancouver. And just having all the dealers, we went to the gala event the night before, but the excitement and the energy from the dealers all being back in the auto show was really great to see. It's maybe we say that whole thing that, grab Peter's term and wreck it a little bit, but that whole return to normalcy or semi-normalcy, I think just that little breath of oxygen to, say, okay, we're starting to get back to this. Auto shows in general, I'm an old classic car guy. We were talking before the show started about old cars and car shows and stuff. And if you'll allow me to take it to hijack, this is a car show that I was at last summer. It's my old Buick here. And you talk about the vibe and people just sort of walking around and being a community. Car guys are car guys. Whether you're a classic car guy or tuner guy or a new car guy, an EV guy, a performance guy, you're a car guy. And when you get a bunch of them in the same room, there's a real energy there that can't be replicated easily.
Yeah, I mean, I was at SEMA last year, and highly recommend the show. Limit yourself a little bit just because of the scale of it. But what was interesting for me, first time being at the show, and it's between 250,000 and 500,000 attendees, depending on the day, was the amount of custom vehicles. But also the interesting part for me was how the OEMs are represented. The biggest OEM at the show was actually Toyota Lexus, which is kind of shocking to me based on the amount of pickups that were there, custom and otherwise. But the other thing that was really interesting was the amount of EVs. There was about 200,000 square feet of EVs at the show. It was 1.6 million square foot of exhibit space at the main hall, plus outside space for enthusiasts, whether it be a drift track or a donut track. But the thing that was really shocking to me or surprising to me was the international representation, because anything to do with customizing a vehicle or vehicles in general was there. But I guess my question is, as I saw EVs, and some of them I thought were interesting conversions, including an original Gullwing, which I thought was probably the worst conversion idea I've ever seen. But there was a lot of interesting conversions. What's your take on the EV side and how that's impacting auto shows? And let's start with Jason on that.
Well, I think that EVs were a critical part of our whole industry and still are and will be for some time to come. When we decided to first really embrace this in 2023 show by installing the 70,000 square foot indoor test track, it was very well received by all the manufacturers. It was totally full up. We couldn't take any more. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, we had a couple more brands come in that specifically mentioned to us, look, the reason why we're here is because, Volvo, Polestar, we don't generally do mainstream shows anymore. We're doing EV shows. But as we go further and further down this trail, all of our shows are going to become, very heavily focused on EVs, because that's where the industry is going, where government regulations are pushing us, not just in Canada, but globally. We did have some, tuners, specialty tuners as well, come in and then demonstrate their products. There was a company from Peterborough that's doing this kind of thing. We had last year even more of those specialty tuner markets coming in. I think we'll see more and more of that kind of thing as we go forward. Every brand is coming out with new EV products, so it's definitely a major future focus for us. The challenge for us is how do we keep a 70,000 square foot space when we've got more brands wanting to come in, because it's a big physical space. It'll probably hold at least another 4 or 5 brands if we decide to release that. But it's such an important part of where we're focused on and where the government is focused on. I think that in all likelihood it will be maintained for next year's show, and we'll find other locations around the show. We actually had brands taking up an option to take non-traditional spaces in the show this year. Ferrari came back for the first time this year to our show with a 6,000 square foot display. We had another brand, Porsche, which had not been in the show officially last year and hadn't been in for a couple of years, come back with their biggest ever display, 10,000 square foot. It wasn't on the main show floor, but in a sub area of the show. And we also saw, several other brands branch out and say, you know what, we don't need to do this traditionally. In fact, one of the more popular feature displays of the show was Pagani McLaren's display, which had a 6,000 square foot display. They didn't do it in a traditional format, and so they saved a lot of money. You don't have to put on a giant palace to have big impact on consumers. In fact, their display was rated as the most popular feature of the show. They didn't even carpet their display, and so you can do this in a very cost-effective manner. We're offering those opportunities to brands that want to be in the show, present themselves, but not have to build a $1 million palace and still have good opportunity to stand out to consumers. And you've got a large number of brands that are really winning. 17% of the consumers that came to the show owned a Toyota, And Toyota had a very positive display. Didn't go over the top in terms of the branding, so the costs weren't crazy, and they're reaping the rewards in terms of the numbers of consumers that come by and interact with them and spend a lot of time in their display. And we're hoping to convince others that didn't come in this year that those numbers, you're also looking at similar levels with some of the other big brands that weren't in the show, and those consumers are shopping and they're going somewhere else. They're looking at competitors' products. So, EV is going to definitely be a part of it. How much the show becomes dominated will depend on consumer sentiment, ability to pay for EV products, because they are more expensive, and that's the big challenge. David and the other associations that are talking to government much more regular than we are trying to say, hey, we all want to be there. We will get there one day, but the speed at which you're trying to push us is it realistic right now? We're not going to make the 20% target that the government set for 2026. It's just not viable. And so those are the difficult questions David has to navigate and try and find a solution for with the powers that be.
David, maybe you can speak to that. I know we've had some talk about huge government federal investment in battery plants. What's your thought on the EV side of car shows and EVs in general? I mean, obviously they're a part of the market.
I think maybe just pivoting off something Jason just said, the opportunity to set up a more bespoke, display at the auto show. And I think some of the companies that maybe haven't been involved in auto shows of late, that's really what they were looking for, is something that was a little bit more bespoke for the customer base, because some of the thinking may be, well, why should I go to the auto show and be right beside my major competitor when I can do something that's a little bit more bespoke on my own and advertise and promote that on my own. And having that separate space at the auto show is maybe a good compromise for some of the manufacturers that Jason mentioned to participate in the show, but still be maybe a little bit more isolated, a little bit more nuanced and different from the rest of the show. So I think that's a good opportunity. With respect to EVs, Jason is right. We're going to see obviously more and more EVs, because that's the way the industry is going, with or without the federal government's regulation. I think that the challenge for automakers is they have to find some way to pay for that transition, and also in terms of how do they promote their products in the marketplace. They promote their EVs, which are still relatively niche vehicles, or do they promote their mainline products that are the ones that consumers are currently buying and are kind of paying the bills to support that transition towards electrification? The EV test track, Vancouver show had one, and it's had one for a while, and Jason's had one for a couple of years now. I think it's critically important to educate consumers and generate consumer awareness about EVs, because very few consumers still have even had the opportunity to drive an EV. And Jason has all those stats in his report from the exit survey. And just getting people to sit in an EV, drive it, even if it's only for a little bit, experience it, ask questions about it. And Jason did his EV experience in conjunction with the folks at Plug and Drive that are completely nonpartisan, have no interest in anything other than helping the consumer understand how EVs work and what some of the differences between the different products are. And I think that's a good way to go, and that's sort of a necessary way to go to help consumers better understand the technology and make this transition. Whether we're going to get to the government's numbers or not, and we're not going to get there unless we get a lot more assistance in other areas. And what I mean by that is maintaining the rebates that are in place, both federally and in some provinces provincially, and also maybe a bigger issue is just building out the infrastructure, so that when consumers are purchasing their vehicle, they know that they can go and reliably charge their vehicle kind of wherever and whenever they want. And for a lot of people that are living in condos or apartment buildings, they'd like to be able to charge their the vehicle at home and not have to rely on infrastructure that's outside the loop.
Yeah, I actually saw an article, I think it was this morning, on the range of cost of charging at different places in the Canadian market or North America based on fast charging, what the range in price was at locations like gas stations, for example, which was kind of interesting. But more importantly, I did a survey over the weekend, I think it was last week, on, you know, what discount on a vehicle would it take for you to jump to EV. And it was kind of interesting, the responses. I think I did 5%, 15, 25, 50 and other. And there was a lot of people that were saying, hey, it would take a significant discount for me to even look at it. So I thought that was interesting. But more importantly, as you've seen Tesla as a brand, A, abandon a low-cost EV, and B, the depreciation numbers are pretty high. So that's another kind of thing that's interesting. But as we look at digital retail these days, which was a big thing at NADA in Vegas this year, as was Fisker. Actually, they were trying to get dealers. So they were there doing test drives in front of NADA, which was interesting. You know, what do you think about the golden age of auto shows, say the 50s and 60s versus today? Do you think the golden age is over, or do you think it's just a new age? I mean, what's your thought? Let's start with David on this first.
I don't know that it's over. I think it's just different, and it's going to be different. And I think, you know, you see, to a large extent, I think something like CES has become probably the biggest auto show now because, again, every automaker's been trying to differentiate themselves and take advantage of the crowds that are at CES, and also take advantage of the technology shift, I think, too, because you're seeing automobiles, they're transitioning from mechanical devices into pure electronic devices, and not sort of more in the wheelhouse of a CES type of a display. And especially with automated and connected vehicles as well, it all kind of maybe fits more neatly into that package. So, you know, are we going to see a renaissance of auto shows to the same level that they used to be in the good old days? My supposition would be probably not, but I think the auto shows as they move forward will be different. We'll probably have a lot more different components to them that would be appealing to, again, maybe people are going to go there for cars, but some of the people that are go there might be for some other element to the show that's sort of bolted onto the show as well, that's related to cars. And some of that might be educational seminars or something when it comes to electrified vehicles and that sort of thing. So I think all these things are possibilities. And you know, I think it's for Jason and some of the other auto show managers to try and define, well, what's the secret sauce that is the good balance between product and other types of displays and whatnot that bring people out. But I mean, Jason, you had the numbers on Lego, and like Lego, I think it's been a really neat addition to your show. They've got great displays, and you know, brings the kids and the families down, and I think they sell a lot of Lego there as well.
So Lego had a big display this year. Is that what happened at the show?
We've had Lego as a partner now for the last, I think, 5 or 6 shows.
Wow.
As well as Hot Wheels, and we try and have this very family-focused, you know, elements within the show. We've got about 7 feature areas that we build out in the show, and I know we do it more than any other show probably in the world, because in terms of the mainstream automobile shows that were out there, we have a very big focus on and put a lot of investment into that side. And so Lego had a big display again this year. They didn't have a full-size car, but they had a very interactive exhibit, and they sold over 18 pallets of Lego. Hot Wheels brought in the Barbie car as well as some other cars from California base, and that was a hugely popular retail space. They sold about the same amount of retail as Lego did. And those are just 2 of our kind of family-focused features. And people are there shopping for cars, but they're also there to have a good time with their families. It's a cultural experience. It really is something which people have done, if not every other year. You know, it's not too far off. It's a big part of the, you know, some of our dealers call it Christmas in February, and they go there for the experience as they're shopping. And so for us, it's a big part of what we're doing as a show, to try to make sure that we stay relevant to all of our consumers. You know, the shows which are challenged and are most challenged are the big international shows, which were really driven by media attendance, because media attendance has totally changed. I mean, from the pandemic really killed these huge junkets of, journalists being flown around the world. I think that's starting to come back. You're seeing that a little bit more, but still not anywhere near the level it used to be. But that's what really drove shows like the Geneva show.
Yeah.
They're not selling many cars in Switzerland for the Geneva show. It was really a media-driven show. And it was also hurting, the cost level when it got so high for companies exhibiting at, let's say, what was Frankfurt, then merged into become Munich, and it's no longer a full-size car show. It's more of a mobility conference that's like 5 days instead of what it used to be. It'll be interesting to see how Paris does this year. But shows that are very focused on consumer interactions, the New York show, the LA show, these really drive sales and awareness and people going into dealerships after the show like ours. And those are doing very well. Thank you very much. And in fact, all shows in Canada that ran this year saw an increase in attendance. So, we're happy with where we are. We just want to try and continue the process of bringing more and more brands involved, because the consumers, the only complaint that they have in terms of our show this year was, we'd still like to see the full gamut of everybody there. And so would we. So that's what we're trying to do over the next couple of months.
So for a company, let's just say a dealership group or an OEM, or even just another company that maybe sells stuff to auto enthusiasts, I mean, what's the process there for them and getting into a show like, for example, Toronto? Like, what would attract them? What does that look like? Like, I'm just curious.
Well, the audience is the big thing that attracts them. I mean, it's 370,000 people coming through over a 10-day period. So that's a massive number of consumers. And as our data shows, there's a large number of them are in the market for a car or car-related elements. I mean, we've got not as many. I mean, most of our space is dedicated to manufacturers. So, the vast majority of our floor space is dedicated that way. But we do have 50 other exhibitors that come in and sell their wares over the 10 days of the show. And they see this, for some companies, it's their biggest selling point of the year. And so this is where they make or break their annual season, and they do that at the show. And where we don't have space sold to manufacturers, then we may open it up and find more retail exhibitors. And so that may be one way that we evolve and shift as we look, perhaps mini SEMA version as well as a car show. And we focus some of our retail space and maybe focus less on some of the features and make more retail. That's just the mix that we all have to kind of look at as we move forward. The process we go through is a post-show final meeting, and planning for next year starts in, we've already had our pre-meeting discussions, but we set our rates in May, and then we go out at the end of May to manufacturers and solicit space requests, and then we start mapping out those spaces in usually mid-July, and kind of lock those down by the end of August with a final floor plan. And right now we're setting up meetings with a number of the brands that weren't at the show this year. And we're very hopeful we'll be able to pull in at least a couple more of those that weren't here, and try and fill out the floor with the rest of the manufacturers that we didn't have. But so far this year, the consumers were really happy to see some of the smaller niche brands that came in. The Rivian came in for the first time at our show. Fisker was here for the first time, at our show with their own standalone display. The Dilawri Group brought the Ineos Grenadier, which is a really interesting looking vehicle that was the first time it was shown publicly in Canada. And I'd like to find more and more of those, because a lot of people want to see those specialty brands, and as well as fill out their main shopping cart with the mainstream brands that you'll find on our show floor. But I'm confident that we'll find at least 2 or 3 more brands coming into the show and be able to maintain the brands that we had, because the consumer interest is so strong.
Fantastic. I mean, I think the last time I was at the Toronto Auto Show, you guys did, I think, 100th anniversary of something or other. I still have photos somewhere. But I think that the thing that's really interesting is we've seen concourse shows expand, be it Las Vegas or other places, is I see maybe an opportunity for some concourse pieces in sort of the larger auto shows. I know Vegas is trying to steal from Pebble Beach, but at the end of the day, I think it would be interesting. There's a collector in Toronto who's now selling his car collection / sneaker collection. We have a regular on the show is a big sneakerhead. I think he's asking $30 million US or something like that. But as you look at the, I guess, collector hobby specifically with the younger generation, not the older generation, it's got to be interesting to see how that could be integrated, both customizing cars, but also showing off what can be done. Any thoughts on that from either of you or anyone else?
Well, I just comment that we have had a association with the Cobble Beach Concours d'Elegance, which runs up just north of Owen Sound. It's having its 10th show this year. We've had a partnership with them since 2015. So they've showcased some of their best and most beautiful collections, and they're drawing cars from right across North America. And it's a very beautiful show. We've really valued it. You know, for many people that attend, it's their favorite feature within our show, because it's really cars that you just will never see, you know, otherwise. And even at the concours, we're bringing in vehicles that really are absolutely spectacular vehicles. I think not all shows, it's an expense. It's a fairly big expense for us to bring in and post this kind of exhibit, but we feel it's worth it and draws a different audience. One of the audiences, I mean, if you walk to, and I go to many of the other car shows, I noticed this year, you know, I went to the Motorama show, which took place a couple of weeks after our show in Toronto, and it's a very different audience. You're right, it's a totally different audience. We used to have a very big focus on those kind of like 50s, 60s, and 70s cars. We ran a program for 10 years called the Cruise Nationals, which was a very popular feature. And I think it's been 10 years since we've done that. So we're looking to probably have a major feature next year focused on that kind of specific audience again, because you know, it's one that we've always had some collector cars like that, but not as big and as robust as we used to. I think it's nice to mix things up and do it a little bit differently. So I think we'll touch on that, but you know, we still have to have enough space for manufacturers. That's our first and foremost. We settle the manufacturer space, and then we plug in the features where we can and where we've got holes to fill. And you know, it's always a very robust mix and a very popular element of our show. These mixture of everything, not just the new cars, but the stuff you see on the fringes as well.
Yeah, David,
if you want to talk about you know, different shows as well. One of the ones that I've been involved with for a while, I serve on the board of directors of Georgian College's Automotive Business School of Canada. And part of the curriculum for the kids at the college is to put on an auto show. And I think that entity in and of itself became a real challenge as we went through, you know, the pandemic time and downsizing. You know, anything that had an auto show label attached to it almost was, you know, immediately struck from a budget, regardless of, you know, how much merit it might have had. But, you know, to go back to something Peter said earlier, you know, is this a cost, or maybe switch around the narrative a little bit, or an investment? And I think when we dialogue with our members and said, look, you know, doing this auto show, it's a small auto show, maybe 20,000 people, you know, in Barrie at the school. You know, are you doing it for, you know, for commercial purposes? No, you're doing it for the purposes of being a little bit altruistic, but what you're really doing it for is you're making an investment in the future of the automotive industry from the perspective of the kids that are putting on the show, that are getting all the experience dealing with customers, representing product in the marketplace, all those sorts of things. So we really worked with the college and the students and repositioned it as you know, an automotive, I think we would call it the automotive experience now, as opposed to an auto show. And then that when you're talking to my members, like executive teams and show teams and whatnot, they look at it, they do it in a different light, or are prepared to provide more consideration being involved directly in that type of experience. And you know, I for one think that's really important as we move forward, just to continue to cultivate the talent that's going to replace, you know, old guys like me in the not too distant future.
And what's your favorite car from this year's show? Any specific car that stood out at the show in Toronto this year?
Well, from my side, you know, I was really happy to have the Rimac Navara. The Rimac was, you know, it's the world's fastest car, and we had Mate Rimac here at the show, which was nice to be able to showcase this. It opened up the show with Richard Hammond as well, driving it out from Top Gear fame, and it's the first time he'd met with Mate since he'd crashed it back way back when. And it was a fun experience to see that come alive. But I mean, Pfaff brought the Paganis. Those were incredible. We've never had 3 Paganis in the show before, and they were stunningly beautiful. Probably $30 million worth of car in one display. And the classic Ferraris. The Ferrari display together with the Pfaff, McLaren, and Pagani display was rated as the 2 most popular features of the show by our consumers. And you can tell. I mean, the Ferrari brand is iconic. You just don't see these. These classic, multi-million-dollar cars in one place. I mean, you take a look. We insure over $100 million worth of feature cars at the show every year, and so
Wow.
this is you just can't go and find that kind of collection in very many places, apart from, let's say, Pebble Beach. But it's a pretty rare collection that we bring together, and it's a testament to the interest of cars in this market, the collectors that we have in this market in Southern Ontario. It's pretty much second to none. This is really a home for supercars and super luxury vehicles, unlike almost any other market in North America, with perhaps the exception of LA. You'll find a greater collection of those kinds of vehicles here than almost anywhere in the world. So it's something we're happy to show off, and it's a big draw for our show as well.
Fantastic. Peter, you were at the show this year. What do you think? What was your favorite car?
Pardon?
What was your favorite car this year?
Favorite car at the show? It's a real toss up for me. There are just so many cars that get displayed. I personally I love Lucas's display for Autostrada when he brings in a dozen really collectible cars and unique cars. But I have to say, of all the cars there, and one of the things that I love is the Jeep event, where they have the actual ability to see what a Jeep can do, and they take you out with the doors off, with the roof off, and they're driving up and down the obstacle course. I think that to me was one of the highlights. And being a Jeep owner myself, and it just really sets it off for me. So
We won't hold that against you, Peter.
We won't hold that against you.
No, it's you know what, I've had everything, and if it really came down to it, I'd be the Porsche guy. I've had 14 of them, so but I still go back to the Jeep event because it's interactive, and that truly is the whole essence of drawing people in. So Jeep would take my nod on the show for sure over all the brands, even though that I do have more favorites at the show than Jeeps. But Jeep is the winner there.
Well, didn't Porsche just open an experience center?
There's over 30,000 people test driving that.
Wow.
So it was a very popular program. So many people would agree.
Absolutely.
And they waited, sometimes up to 2 hours to get a test.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's like Disneyland for car owners.
Well, didn't Porsche just open an experience center in Toronto? Or are they in process?
It's halfway built.
Yeah. There's also one in the States where you can live at a track now that they're advertising in the Porsche Owners Magazine, which is kind of interesting.
Atlanta Motorsports.
Yeah. Any thoughts, David, on favorite car?
Well, I'm kind of in a compromised position given my membership. So I got lots
Favorite
of
series of cars? Top 5?
I'll say one for a different reason though. I think one of my favorite cars, just for I think the media attention that it got, was probably, again, the Barbie car, the Corvette there from the movie. And I think just from the perspective of, I was there and the media days and whatnot, but I was also there during the regular showtime, and just to see, like, especially little girls get excited and jazzed about, the Barbie car being at an auto show. And again, that's a whole other, area that I think we need to maybe exploit is the wrong word, but take advantage of, is the fact that, traditionally I think auto shows tend to be focused on the male dynamic and fathers and sons, or guys going out with their buddies to the shows. And I think the more you can bring in families and girls as well, and going back to the point that I previously made, making making the automotive industry look attractive, because it is from a remuneration perspective and from a technology perspective right now, for not only males but for females getting into a cutting edge industry. We'd be well served to focus a little bit more attention, I think, on the female gender getting involved in the industry.
Yeah, we've done lots of shows on women in auto, and I'm going back 4 years now. When we first started doing them, people are like, "What are you doing?" But fast forward 4 years, it's more and more a part of what we do. But more importantly, there's some very strong women in the industry, and there's a lot of women who want to enter the industry but just don't know how. So I agree with that 100%. And when you look at car purchases, women, I think statistics are about 80% of that decision. So when you look at car dealers and car manufacturers and even car shows, I'm not sure what the attendance numbers in terms of by gender are these days, but I would expect it to be pretty high on the female side. Is that correct? Jason?
Yeah, I mean, it's high just because it's difficult to tell for sure because we don't do a physical count.
Right.
And women, I mean, we don't have a guy with a clicking device. We do find that the tendency tends to be more the men that buy the ticket. Most of the people that come to the show come with friends or family.
Yeah.
So it's like you come with your girlfriend, or your wife and your kids, and you're checking out your new vehicles that you want to get. So the numbers are a little bit skewed. It's about 70-30 in terms of the numbers of people that buy tickets, men versus women. But we know that it's much closer to probably 55-45% in terms of physical attendance at the show, just from walking the show and seeing who's there. And it's a relatively even mix of because it is so many families that come as the purchase decision, as you say, is such an important one for the family to make. This is why even though that there's a lot of companies still selling the option of you can do everything online, you still are physically wanting to get and see the vehicle. It's too big an expense, especially these days, to go and buy something sight unseen without physically touching it, feeling it, and seeing if the back seat's big enough for the rest of the family, and the trunk space is what you need it to be, that sort of thing. So, it is a mix, and I take David's point. It is really an area that we think we can focus more on and do a lot more from an education perspective, and bringing opportunities available for young people to join into the business, and something we're going to be having a big focus on next year at the show. Yeah,
I think it was this year or might have been last year. I think Danica Patrick spoke at NADA, I believe. I wasn't there, but I believe she did. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to see some of these pro racers or pro drivers appear at some of these shows, just to draw in some women who maybe want some inspiration. But insensitive to time, we've got 7 minutes left. Final comments from anybody. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing in addition to what Jason was just saying about actually experiencing the vehicles, touching them and seeing them. And I think that's all the more important with the electric vehicle test track that he had as well, because the inventories have improved greatly for EVs, but to be able to go one place and drive anyone, I think you had 25 different EVs there, Jason. That's really important for people where you're not, if you go down to your local dealer, you may not even have the opportunity to be able to do that. So being able to touch, drive, feel, how an EV works is critical to moving forward towards this goal of increased electrification.
Any final thoughts there, Jason?
Well, I mean, we're coming from a position of strength this year. We had really great attendance. We have more interest from manufacturers to come in next year. I think that we're in a good spot, and it's not all international shows are in the same boat, but we've got a very strong marketplace in Toronto, and Montreal did well, Vancouver did well this year. So we're looking at from a very positive perspective how we move forward. I was at the New York show a couple of weeks ago with the New York and LA show organizers. We're talking about collaborative ideas that we can work on together to kind of make sure that when we're doing our consumer surveys, we're getting the same kind of data. So we got comparable information that manufacturers can share between our different shows. They're different markets and different consumers, but it's people are making these decisions are centralized, and even for the Canadian market, a lot of the decisions are made in the United States. And so, to have comparable data is, I think, important, and maybe even sharing some feature elements between our shows. But we're in a very positive spot. We're happy to be where we are. We just want to try and complete the circuit and get as many of the brands that weren't there to come back and be a part of this excitement, because it is an exciting time and there's a lot of consumers that are making decisions there. So it's a place to be.
Fantastic. Any final thoughts from Troy or Peter?
You know, I will say, oh, sorry, Peter.
Go
I will
ahead,
say
Rick.
that you know, David said it earlier, and we were talking about old guys like us cycling out of the car game and trying to get new blood and engaged. Watching kids at a car show, whether it's the international car shows or the classic car shows or a car meet on a Sunday, that's really cool. And when you see some kids with their phones or whatever taking photos of old cars, that's the magic right there. And you know, having the shows be more family friendly and interactive, I think that's really the secret sauce. Because you know, you talk about kids not having an interest in car ownership or even getting driver's licenses anymore. To know there's at least a generation that's building under the surface that is interested is really exciting to see.
Thanks, Peter.
Well, I'll agree with Troy there. The upcoming generation, I believe it's called Generation Alpha.
Yep.
Is going to be the true sweet spot for generations to come for automobiles. The current generation doesn't necessarily care about driving. They've grown up under Ubers, and that's their form of transportation. I think the car shows have a fantastic future coming along. The growth comparison of last year's show or the 2024 show shows that it is a positive event. I look forward to it every year. I've actually, in my calendar of events that I share within our industry, includes Toronto, Chicago, New York, LA, and obviously Detroit as a must go to events. So I look forward to it every year, and I think we got to really promote that to expand on the sales growth at the dealership levels.
Thanks for that. Thanks for everyone for your input. And if you are interested in some statistics and data for the Toronto show, definitely reach out, Ian and Jeff at AutoHubShow.com, and have yourself a great week. Thanks for joining. Bye for now.
Thank you, gentlemen. Take care.
Thanks, guys.